Jason Kincaid did his story. And look at the photo. You'll probably see if you can recognize somebody. So I'm going to blow this photo up. You probably still can't recognize somebody whose nose is really pixelated. But now you can. So that's me, powerless and obscure, in the audience 2 years ago. And I guess the central theme of my talk today is, I really think it's not impossible to be on stage 2 years from now. And you'll see from my story, it's not impossible. So let's start. So the story starts back in 2004. I went to the Rhode Island School of Design, and I went with my co-founder and my best friend at RISD, Joe Gebbia. And on the day of graduation, Joe looks at me and he says, "Brian, I think we're going to start a company together." So I said, "Well, I already have a job. I'll see you." So I went to Los Angeles, and poor Joe was stuck back in Providence, Rhode Island. But literally 1,000 days ago, and it was weird when I was constructing the title, it was like 1,040 days. So October 2007, 1,000 days ago, he calls me up and he says he's got this apartment, his roommate has moved out, and he says, "Brian, let's start a company." And I said, "Okay, let's start a company." So I literally quit my job, I left my house, I left all my possessions, I even broke up my girlfriend, but I was probably that one anyways. And I drove up to San Francisco, and Joe tells me the rent's $1,150, and I have $1,000 in the bank account. And I said, I probably should have asked about that before I moved up. So it turns out that weekend, an international design conference was coming to San Francisco, and all the hotels were sold out. And at RISD, it's Rhode Island School of Design, it's an art school, they really teach you that creativity can solve problems. If you're creative and you identify an everyday problem that you deal with, you can actually solve that. And for us, this is a problem. And part of it was making rent, but part of it was we just wanted to solve the problem with a creative solution. And in literally 30 minutes, we built this as we were talking. And I don't know, I'm not here to give lessons except to say if you have an idea, just put something out there in 20, 30 minutes, don't worry how bad it looks. And our first launch, our first of many, was this. And this is a site that 2 designers had built. Looks pretty modest today. We ended up hosting 3 people from around the world. A mole actually came from India. Catherine was a 35-year-old woman from Boston. And Michael, that's not Michael, I just got a 45-year-old guy from Google News. I couldn't actually find a photo of Michael, but anyways, this 45-year-old father of 5 from Utah slept on an airbed in my living room. Well, we came up with the idea it would be an air bed and breakfast because, all the hotels are sold out. It wasn't going to be a designer. We wanted to originally do a design bed and breakfast, but I actually didn't have any furniture. Remember, I had moved up there. But Joe said he had some air beds, and that's where the name came to. So I decided that I would chronicle our 1,000 days through traffic. And so this was our first launch. And a couple months later, South by Southwest was coming up. And we decided, why don't we build a site where you can basically provide air beds for conferences all over the United States. We'll do what we did for that conference for conferences all over the country. And it turned out that launching for South by Southwest, we thought, would be the best time to do it because that is basically one of the preeminent tech events in the country. I asked Joe, I said, "Joe, who's the best engineer you know?" He said his old roommate Nate is. And so in March of 2008, we did our second launch. And it looked like this. Air beds for conferences. And that's our strategy. So that was our second launch. A few months had gone by. And 3 things happened at that conference. The first thing is I show up, and by the way, we didn't have payments at the time. So I show up, and I forgot to go to the ATM. So I show up to this guy's house. He lets me in. We have dinner together. And then he says, all right, he's kind of uncomfortable. He's like, all right, it's going to be $200. And I'm like, oh. Can I get to you tomorrow? And it was really awkward, and here I am, a guy, some stranger now sleeping in his living room, and he's like, what the hell did I get myself into here? The second thing happened is I met a couple people, and one of the people said, Brian, I'd love to go use your product. I'm going to London, but there's no conference. So we said, that's kind of limiting. Why should it only be for conferences? And the third thing is we met this guy right here, Michael Seibel. Michael Seib was the CEO of Justin.tv. You know, before we came up here, I didn't know anything about even Y Combinator, TechCrunch. I was an industrial designer working out of Los Angeles. And Michael basically informally brought us into the YC community. I'm not sure if I should tell you to reach out to YC alumni without going through the program, but I actually did. It worked out really well. Michael basically channeled his inner Paul Graham. He was basically giving us advice, taught us the YC methodology. We called him the God Founder. And so in the summer of 2008, we did a third launch. And it's kind of similar to what you see today. You type in a city, you find a listing, you find it on an app. In fact, that was a room photo that you notice is the same size as the person. Well, Craigslist photos are that size. And we figured, well, there's a reason they have them that big. I mean, the people don't want big photos. We didn't know any better. And the Democratic National Convention was coming up. We built this amazing product, or what I thought at the time was a pretty innovative product. In other words, you'd be able to book an average person's space, the way you could book a hotel room. You get an authentic space. Well, the problem is that no one wants to list their space if no one's going to book it. And I can't, it's unlike, I can't put MP3s in the site. It's like, actually we should have done that and maybe we would have got more traffic. You know, I can't tell people, go to this website with no one listing. It's a chicken and egg problem. Well, it turns out that making things for press is a really good idea. Barack Obama announced he was going to speak in his 80,000 seat football arena where the Denver Broncos speak, and there are 27,000 hotel rooms. So we're doing the math, and we realized there's an opportunity here. And this was going to be what was going to put us on the map. So we started noticing Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, this entire 24/7 news cycle is obsessed. They're looking for stories. People start writing about the DNC housing crisis. So how did we get press? We typed in DNC housing crisis in Google News, and we emailed every single person that wrote about it. Now, if you email CNN, they're not going to write you back. But if you email a blogger, they'll probably write about you. And then you go to local news. And the local news will then Google you. And they'll see that bloggers are talking about you. So then they'll do a story about you. Then the Denver Post and the Rocky Mountain News are going to Google you and see that all these people are talking about you. And eventually, CNN is going to be following their own keywords, and they'll notice you, and then they'll cover you. And that's what happened. We got 800 people to list their rooms, and this event and this press tactic was really the thing that got us over that initial hump. So we... It gets better. 2 months later, we realized if only there were political conventions every week, we'd be huge. So we're sitting in our apartment, and we realized, well, I don't want to wait till 2012 to get more reservations. And this is where the story kind of goes on a weird sidetrack, so I just want to warn you now. We had a lot of time on our hands, let's just say that. In other words, when you build a product, a marketplace, and no one uses your marketplace, you have a lot of time. So we had a lot of time on our hands, and we're sitting in the kitchen one day, and by the way, we had also provided housing for a Republican National Convention. No one went to that. We got I think one booking. And so we have a lot of time on our hands, we're in the kitchen, we're like, what if we made a breakfast that we could send to the people hosting? You know, it's like a nice exchange. Well, we're not going to send them eggs. It's not going to be a perishable. And so obviously we thought, let's send them a breakfast cereal. We're just having fun. By the way, as I said, we had a lot of time on our hands. And we're thinking, what would an Obama-themed cereal be called? And we just are basically joking around. And we decide, we come up with this name we think is hilarious. It's a hilarious name. Oops, sorry. We have a hilarious name, and we create this product we call Obama O's. The breakfast of change. We also had hope in every bowl. I like that one too. So we designed this box, mostly, as I said, we had a lot of time on our hands, but then we started realizing this is a really cool design. We want to sell this. But we needed a gimmick so people would find out about this. So we made a video, and we actually got a guy to make us a jingle. Should I play the jingle?
Hell yeah!
All right, here's the jingle.
everybody's talking about Obama O's. There's just one bite you will understand, 'cause every single O sings yes we can. Oh my God, it's Obama O's. Mommy, can I have some please?
So, by the way, I know what you're thinking. We had a web startup, now we're making cereal. Yeah. Well, you know, we had no traffic, so. So, you know, a company from San Francisco that wants to be an open platform, you got to be very careful if you're only doing things for Democrats, right? We wanted people from all over the world to use us. So we said, if we make a Barack Obama themed cereal, we have to make a John McCain themed cereal. And we're thinking, what would a John McCain themed cereal be called? And we're reading about him on Wikipedia. We find out he was a captain in the Navy, and that's what we came up with, Captain McCain's. A maverick in every bite. And as you can predict, we got a jingle made for that as well.
Captain McCain's have all the squares you need to succeed. Driving that straight talk express at full speed. Stay the course, never surrender.